Mr. President, thank you so much for sitting down with us for this interview. Let me start off by asking you about your opinion on the global economy. Right now, the IMF is projecting the global economy to reach pre-pandemic level this year, but it also warns of divergence between advanced economies and developing economies. So what is your view on the BRICS right now?
Yeah, so I guess BRICS countries were doing relatively well prior to COVID-19. China was moving forward in its structural transformation towards becoming a more tech-intensive, more reliant on its domestic market economy. Russia, too, with the implementation of sustainable development friendly approaches, including more ESG frameworks. India, in a very ambitious project of attracting manufacturing hubs. Prime Minister Modi rolling out its Make in India program so that India could capture an important set of links of the so-called global manufacturing chains. South Africa being part of a regional trade agreement that also has a lot of outreach and may multiply the economic positive effects of the entire African continent. In Brazil, prior to COVID, enacting some of the most ambitious and all-encompassing structural reforms, including reform of the pension system, administrative reform, tax reform, the opening up of the economy. So what COVID did to these economies is that the brakes were pushed hard. It was like the global economy had to push the pause button. Some say that this is not a great recession. Some say that this is a great intermission. So it's like an intermission between one act and the other. The metaphor that I like to use is the metaphor of when you're watching a movie and you want to fast forward it. So what you do is you actually pause it and then you accelerate the pace with which you move towards the future. So I think this is very much out in the open. It's true that some trends that were visible before COVID have gained strength and momentum, like the reconfiguration of global value chains. I think this is going forward, and we can talk about that. I think there's a stronger emphasis on talent. So talent-intensive countries, the countries that are better prepared to face the productive challenges of the economy 4.0 are going to fare better. I think there's a renewed emphasis on reforming domestic structure so as to allow for more inflow of foreign direct investment. So these trends that were there, they're going to continue. Of course, there's also a renewed element of importance when it comes to technology and technology in our lives. I think the pandemic has also shown how, on the one hand, it's very important to be together, but there is a number of activities that actually can be carried out remotely thanks to technology. So this is, of course, only going to gain scale and pace. And I guess now, as countries roll out their vaccination programs, as vaccines become more available, economic recovery is going to gain momentum. You can see that already very clearly in China. Numbers for Q1 2021 were very impressive, 18.3% expansion. The International Monetary Fund also predicts a major rebound for India this year, especially as it controls the pandemic. And the other BRICS are going to grow north of 3%. The important thing is that this is sustained over time, because we want to make sure that these countries have, still the necessary pillars to economic recovery and to resume the structural reform path that they were traveling on prior to the pandemic. So another characteristic, which I think is very important of the current trajectory, yes, of course, you talk about divergence, but there's also convergence. If you take into consideration the so-called E7, the 7 top emerging economies of the world, so China, India, Indonesia, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, Turkey, Today they have a combined gross domestic product measured in purchase power parity terms of about $53 trillion. Whereas the traditional G7, the United States, Japan, Germany, France, UK, Italy, Canada have a combined GDP of $40 trillion in terms of purchase power parity terms. So there's been a tilt, as it was predicted in the past, towards the big emerging economies. The thing is, there's divergence also within the emerging economy world. Of course, those countries that are very dependent on tourism, for example, some island nations, some poorer nations in Africa and Latin America and in Asia are facing difficulties both in terms of debt and in terms of resuming economic growth. Because at the end of the day, it's economic growth, robust economic growth, that will get us out of this crisis.
And how is South Africa doing now?
So South Africa is like, when it comes to the BRICS, like Brazil, India, and Russia, still coping with COVID. It has a high unemployment rate, but on the other hand, the prospects are very good. The IMF is looking at an expansion of 3.1% this year for South Africa. Once again, structural reform, modernization, improving the business climate so as to allow for more foreign direct investment. That's the way forward for South Africa.